Tonight, Donald Trump refuses to relent on his threat to take over Canada.
I feel they have to become a state.
The president's claim that Canada has essentially no military and few economic options without the United States.
They need our protection.
At issue on Canada's plan to fight back. A blast of winter from Ontario to Newfoundland.
So we're Canadians. Have to keep going.
More than 40 centimeters in places, and more is on the way. And exclusive new details about that dramatic gold heist at Toronto's Pearson Airport.
This story is a sensational one.
The Fifth Estate obtains alleged messages between the suspects and tracks down where all that gold may have gone.
It's pretty much untraceable after that.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thank you for joining us. Well, tonight, Donald Trump has laid out the first steps in his plan to potentially tariff any country in the world. But yet again, his attention and his threats shifted to Canada. Without any prompting, the U.S. president made multiple damaging assertions on Canada's economy, claiming this country can't survive without America, on defense, stating we don't have any military protection, and on sovereignty, in no uncertain terms, saying Canada will have to become a state. Trump's advisors have consistently said to take him at his word. And as Paul Hunter shows us, those words seem intended to provoke Canadians and unsettle everyone.
Showing for all to see his latest executive action, U.S. President Donald Trump was clear.
This is an amazing day. I think this is going to be a very big day and in a very positive way for our country. Yes.
A plan to study tariffs effectively for the whole world that would be applied several weeks from now. Tit-for-tat reciprocal tariffs that the U.S. would apply to goods from any country which already has tariffs on U.S. goods. Critics say it risks a global trade war and higher prices for Americans, says Trump.
Oh, I think what's going to go up is jobs are going to go up, and prices could go up somewhat short term, but prices will also go down.
Trump adding the tariffs would also raise money for America. How much money?
That's the most interesting question. I think it'll be a staggering amount.
But then, as has become his practice, Trump spoke on just about anything, including, again, without prompting, Canada, including, again, a dig at the Prime Minister.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau.
Governor Trudeau, said Trump, reiterating his view Canada would be better off joining America, this time hinting maybe it needs to.
That have perfect military protection. They don't have any military protection because and you take a look at what's going on out there. You have Russian ships, you have China ships, you have Chinese ships, you have a lot of ships out there, and you know, people are in danger. This is a different world today. It's a different world. They need our protection.
He didn't elaborate on that need, but did say
they think we're going to, you know, protect them with our military, which is unfair. So Canada is going to be a very interesting situation. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
At one point in the Oval, Adrian, Trump said, re Canada, sometimes when I talk about this, people smile, as if to remind us all he is the president of the United States saying this, and he's doing so repeatedly.
Yeah, it's been a pretty astonishing first few weeks on that front, and so many others.
It sure has. I mean, it never stops. Even today, he also talked about instigating talks between the U.S., Russia, and China to reduce nuclear weaponry. He'll get to that, he said, after dealing with the Middle East and Ukraine. And then there's the tariff thing and its implications worldwide, including those specific tariffs against Canada. And on top of that, everything else on every other day, Adrian.
Whew. All right, Paul Hunter in Washington. So let's bring in senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong. Let's talk about these reciprocal tariffs, because the thing is, they're sweeping, but they're also very, very vague. What are Canadians supposed to make of this?
Look, if Canadians are sitting at home confused by this, they're not alone, and their instincts are right. This is such a mind-boggling increase to the number of tariffs, to the way they might work, to how they might get costed out. We simply don't have enough information for us to figure out, frankly, what this is, let alone how businesses, people, policymakers should respond.
Okay, so that's not comforting. Where are people supposed to to go to try to get a handle on it?
So when I'm confused, which happens a lot, I look to markets because they've got to figure out how to spend money based on where things are headed, what it might mean for earnings and the economy. And markets have largely shrugged all of these threats off. Today, you have this massive sweeping threat. Markets were up. The S&P 500 almost set a record today.
So is that to say that some people, some markets included, think this is just a bluff?
Some people do. Some people think we just don't have enough information to act yet. The concern, though, is that Trump is making all these threats. This is on top of the steel and aluminum tariffs, on top of those broad 25% tariffs on all goods. He hasn't imposed anything on anyone yet. And the concern is that eventually he'll have to make good on some of these threats or they won't work anymore. And so the question comes back to who's he going to go after and when's that going to happen?
Okay, Peter Armstrong, thank you.
You bet.
So Rosie and At Issue are here to talk about all of these tariff threats and the Premier's attempt to stave them off. That is in about 25 minutes. Well, CBC News has obtained exclusive data that challenges claims U.S. President Donald Trump has made about the Canadian border. In fact, there's been a spike in the volume of U.S. drugs and guns seized at the border by Canada. Last year, Canada intercepted more drugs headed north than the U.S. caught headed south. JP Tasker explains why.
President Donald Trump says Canada is fueling the U.S. drug problem.
Canada's a very bad abuser.
But a CBC News analysis of border data shows Canada has reason to worry about what's coming in too. There's been a surge in the amount of drugs intercepted by the Canada Border Services Agency at the border.
It is a public safety and security and emergency, not just in the United States. It's killing people here in Canada.
Drug seizures have doubled in the last 2 years, spiking from nearly 4 million grams to 8 million. Cannabis, heroin, cocaine, and crack, they're all up. And it adds up to a lot more than the 5 million grams the Americans grabbed last year on their side of the 49th parallel.
Why are we seeing such a huge increase?
We live next door to the largest weapons market in the world, the largest drug market in the world.
This border security expert says that during the pandemic, Mexican drug cartels moved some production to the U.S. That's now easier to smuggle into Canada. It's how you end up with a drug bust like this. 835 kilograms of cocaine, all traced to the U.S. And it's not just drugs. 9 in 10 guns taken by police in Toronto last year were from the States. Canada's border strategy can't just be about appeasing Trump, says this former national security advisor.
It's not just a matter of checking what's going out, but it's checking what's coming in. The border goes both ways.
The public safety minister says Canada has raised the rising influx of guns and drugs with the White House. The immediate concern, though, is a fentanyl crackdown to avoid tariffs.
We should be focused on eliminating the scourge that is fentanyl in this country and in the United States.
The CBSA just got a cash infusion of $1.3 billion, and it tells me some of that money will be put aside to cut off the flood of American drugs and guns. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Several members of a Quebec swimming team were rushed to hospital today after their bus collided with a truck. So the crash happened in Mont-Laurier, about 2 hours north of Ottawa. According to the Quebec Swimming Federation, a coach was seriously injured. Some minors were also hurt. The cause hasn't yet been determined. Atlantic Canada is being hit tonight by the same winter storm that just hammered Ontario and Quebec. As Nicole Williams shows us, it has left people digging out of up to 45 centimeters of snow, and officials urging everyone to stay safe.
The morning commute, a real slog. Some needing a helping hand. This one caught on live TV.
So people are trudging through it to get across the Oh, somebody just fell. Oh, no.
The storm touched down in southwestern Ontario Wednesday evening before sweeping its way east. More than 25 centimeters of snow fell in Toronto, more than 30 in Ottawa, up to 45 in areas close to Montreal. And snow is still falling in much of Atlantic Canada, some trying to use it to their advantage.
I thought this might be a bit faster than walking, but I don't know if it's going to be. It's more fun though.
Others just trying to survive it.
I think I'll be staying inside once I've got my Starbucks. I think I'll be hunkering down.
We're Canadians. Have to keep going.
Some attempting to do just that, but without much success.
This is a two-person.
Many schools across Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes closed as roads became increasingly dangerous, leaving some buses in Ottawa stuck.
And then when he got stuck, I was like, I told myself. I knew it was going to happen.
Hundreds of flights across the country delayed or canceled. Passengers as far as Washington, Florida, and Cuba stranded. City crews now facing a mountain of cleanup.
We're full deployed with 1,000 workers, 1,000 trucks on the road.
But officials say finishing the job will take time.
We will need to continue to be plowing throughout the day and into Friday.
Officials are urging patience and safety first. Toronto police say they've responded to more than 100 weather-related incidents, and people in Atlantic Canada being asked to stay off the roads if they can. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Toronto.
So let's bring in CBC News meteorologist Colette Kennedy now. So Colette, we saw that big hit of winter, but there is, it seems, a lot more on the way.
Yes, this could potentially be an even bigger system coming in for the weekend. So dealing with the storm that's been moving through, improvement continues as we go into the morning hours on Friday, including getting rid of some of that icy mix from Nova Scotia. But strong winds in the wake of that system and cold temperatures back across the Great Lakes means areas that were getting a little bit of melting and some slushiness today, that becomes very, very slick as it freezes up. Plus the winds are driving snow squalls and blowing snow. Then we look to the jet stream, and that's our storm track. There's the energy with the system that's exiting. More energy coming into the west coast, which is going to fuel a 1-2 punch Saturday and Sunday, where potentially those snowfall amounts between the 2 days could put areas that just were hit quite hard with an additional 40 centimeters or more of snowfall. So a lot going on through the weekend, and then it doesn't even end there, because after that, Central Canada, Atlantic Canada are not going to be able to escape that extreme cold that has been gripping the West.
Yikes. All right, Colette Kennedy, thank you, I think.
Yeah.
So you heard Colette mention that extreme cold in the West. Well, it has much of the prairies in a deep freeze. Swaths of Manitoba and Saskatchewan are experiencing wind chills of -40 or lower, along with parts of northern Alberta and Ontario. Environment Canada reminding people to bundle up because frostbite can develop within minutes. Well, the constant threats from Donald Trump have upended the Canadian political landscape. Marina von Stackelberg shows us how it's defining the Liberal leadership race and how candidates are honing their messages.
In less than a month, Canada will have a new Prime Minister. The contenders for Liberal Party leader are jostling for the job.
We need to build a lot of homes.
A plan to update our social safety net.
But on the biggest issue Canada faces, one candidate has staked out a bold position.
We are going to go after American stakeholders who matter to the White House.
Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland doubling down on her aggressive plan to deal with Trump's threat to tariff Canadian exports, including aluminum and steel.
I have proposed a 100% tariff on all Teslas. I am calling on all the countries that are affected by this tariff to join us.
Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has been notably thin on policy details, like how he'd deal with Trump.
I'm careful in what I say about the current status of negotiations. My focus has majored on what we should do here in Canada to strengthen our economy.
Carney's approach seems to be working.
We do see in polls that Carney is preferred over Chrystia Freeland as the Liberal leader.
In a recent online survey from Leger, Canadians were asked who they trust most to defend our country's interests against Trump. 22% of respondents chose Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. 20% said Mark Carney. Only 6% picked Chrystia Freeland. Leadership hopefuls will have to make their positions clear on how they intend to respond to the U.S. president. Canadians will have a chance to hear their plans later this month when the candidates face off in 2 debates. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been confirmed as Donald Trump's new Secretary of Health and Human Services.
On this vote, the yeas are 52, the nays are 48. The confirmation is confirmed.
So the Senate essentially voted along party lines with just one Republican holdout. RFK Jr. has been a vocal vaccine skeptic, has vowed to take aim at the pharmaceutical industry and overhaul the Food and Drug Administration. He's now set to oversee trillions of dollars in annual healthcare spending. Well, Russian and U.S. officials will meet Friday on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. According to Donald Trump, Ukraine is invited, as President Zelensky insists his country will not be sidelined in Trump and Putin's peace talks. Chris Brown shows us where things stand.
It was a telephone call the whole world is talking about, gushed Russia's top news channels, casting it as a big win for Vladimir Putin that Donald Trump phoned him before Vladimir Zelensky, and even thanked Putin for wanting to end the war he started in the first place. The Russian leader's long-standing goal has been to make Ukraine a puppet state, so Trump's plan smelled of betrayal to many Ukrainians, leaving its president to put on a brave face. We as a sovereign country simply will not be able to accept any agreements without us, said Zelensky.
Had a great call.
Trump said Zelensky might not even be part of the talks at first, nor would the European countries that would guarantee Ukraine's security afterward.
Any deal behind our backs will not work. Any agreement will need also Ukraine and Europe being part of it, and this is clear that appeasement also always fails.
In Brussels for a NATO meeting, the U.S. Defense Secretary insisted no one is being cut out.
There is no betrayal there. There is a recognition that the whole world and the United States is invested and interested in peace.
This Ukrainian MP says it's unclear what leverage Trump plans to use against Putin to push back.
He put it in very abstract terms, which to me signifies that he doesn't have yet clear picture of a peace plan or what should be done.
But after 3 years of continual war, Ukrainians are exhausted. This wounded infantryman spoke to our CBC producer. I have a lot of friends in captivity, he said. When all the guys come back home, then it will be a victory for me. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
If the meeting between U.S. and Russian officials goes ahead tomorrow, it will take place in a city reeling from a shocking attack. What we know about the suspect who plowed through a crowd in Munich, injuring dozens. A terrifying moment off the coast of Chile after a man is swallowed by a whale and lives. And a hockey crowd roars with pride.
It was such a beautiful experience.
We're back in 2. In Munich, Germany, at least 30 people are injured, including children, after a driver slammed into a crowd at a labor union rally. Senior international correspondent Margaret Evans is in Germany tonight with what authorities believe was a deliberate attack.
A heavy police presence still on the streets in the hours after the apparent attack. A small white car driving into a trade union rally during a public sector strike in the center of Munich, sowing fear and chaos. Working nearby, eyewitness Alexa Greve says it looked like the car accelerated into the crowd. There were some injured people on the bench right next to our office, she says. Police arrested the driver reportedly after firing one shot. He's been identified as a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker who reportedly came to Germany as a minor in 2016. His claim rejected, according to the Interior Ministry. The incident comes just a day before the Munich Security Conference, attended by world dignitaries, is expected to begin. Police don't believe there's a link. Bavaria's Premier Markus Söder says he does believe it was a deliberate attack of some sort. There are many indications of that, he says. We react prudently to any such attack, but I can also tell you that our resolve is growing. Security and immigration issues have dominated the current federal election campaign in Germany in the wake of a string of similar attacks in recent months. The far-right Alternative for Germany party accused of using them to stoke anti-immigrant sentiment, with rights groups pointing to a spike in attacks on asylum seekers. With the election just over a week away, you can expect immigration to continue to dominate the debate at the expense of other issues, say critics, including foreign policy, with Washington so at odds with its NATO partners over Ukraine. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Berlin.
CBC News uncovers exclusive details about an infamous gold heist and the men allegedly involved.
This story is a sensational one, and one which probably belongs in a Netflix series.
The Fifth Estate investigates the brazen theft and where millions of dollars worth of gold could have ended up. And Rosie's here with that issue. Hello, you.
Hey, Adrian. Tonight we're going to talk about Canada's premiers in Washington pushing back against Trump's ongoing tariff threats.
Canada's been very bad to us on trade, but now Canada's going to have to start paying up.
Are their messages getting through to the president? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and a whole lot more.
Yeah, that's exactly what you think it is. That kayaker swallowed by a humpback whale off the coast of Chile, emerging seconds later unharmed. He and his father recording the close call. They got to shore safely, but on that moment he spent in the whale's mouth, he confessed, "I thought I was dead." Well, there's a major recall to tell you about tonight. Nearly 50,000 coolers sold in Canada have been recalled. The handles of Igloo brand coolers pinched fingertips, resulting in some amputations. At least 12 people have been hurt in the U.S. So far, there have been no reported injuries here. Well, tonight we have exclusive new details on a notorious heist. In April of 2023, gold bars worth more than $20 million were stolen from Toronto's Pearson Airport. Well, now the Fifth Estate has obtained an internal document that investigators say sheds new light on how the heist may have gone down. Fifth Estate co-host Stephen D'Souza shows us where some of that loot may have ended up.
It seemed like a routine pickup, but you're watching the largest gold theft in Canadian history.
This story is a sensational one, and one which probably belongs in a Netflix series.
Last year, police charged 9 men in the brazen heist. Now, the Fifth Estate has obtained new details. A document in which investigators suggest one suspect was the principal planner, Arsalan Chaudhry. The document alleges the day of the heist, he was at a nearby airport hotel and contacted the other suspects more than 800 times. One of those alleged contacts, Simranpreet Panasar, a manager at the cargo facility. The Crown alleges he looked up the incoming gold flight, then manipulated the cargo system to allow the gold shipment to be removed. The information comes from a draft of an internal document. It's a snapshot of the investigation. The information has not been tested in court as accurate or reliable. The morning after the heist, the document alleges there was a WhatsApp exchange between Chaudhry and another suspect. It suggests the suspect wrote, "I'm so happy for you, bro. I can't even sleep, LOL." Chaudhry replies, "It's insane." Then about 2 months after the heist, a suspect allegedly texts Chaudhry, "They took all of it." Chaudhry replies, "Thought they would." The internal document interprets this as the sale of a portion of the gold. We went to Dubai where, according to police, some of the gold may have also ended up.
If you need to move illicit gold, Dubai is going to be on your menu of choices, and it's going to be high up on your menu of choices.
Experts say if the gold was melted in the region, it's likely gone for good.
You know, once it's gone through the refinery process, it's pretty much untraceable after that.
Arsalan Chaudhry is wanted on a Canada-wide warrant, and we tried to track him down in Dubai, but as you'll see in our documentary, Adrian, our search took an unexpected turn.
Okay, so obviously we will have to watch that to figure that out, but I also understand that you found another suspect.
Simranpreet Panesar left Air Canada just after the gold heist and moved to India, and police didn't really know where he was, but we used social media posts and local journalists, and we tracked him down. He told us he's innocent and wrongly implicated. Meanwhile, the suspects here in Canada, none have entered pleas, and no trial date has been set.
Okay, we'll be watching. Stephen D'Souza, thank you.
Thank you.
So Stephen's full investigation for the Fifth Estate lands tomorrow night on CBC television, or you can find it on CBC Gem. Now, let's break down this week in politics. Rosie's here with that issue.
At issue tonight, talking to Washington, Donald Trump continues to attack Canada.
Canada's been very bad to us on trade, but now Canada's going to have to start paying up.
As Canada's political leaders take their case to D.C.
Make no mistake about it, the president knows we're here. He knows we're concerned.
I'm confident that we very much have their attention.
Premiers also push back on Trump's annexation threats, but White House officials say they never agreed to Canada not becoming the 51st state. So how effective was the Premier's trip to Washington? Were they able to make their case against tariffs? Are we making any progress at all? I'm Rosemary Barton here to break it all down tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj, good to see you all. Let's start with the Premier, Chantal. It wasn't a disaster, I don't think. They were able to get to the White House and talk to some people, but how would you gauge what they were able to accomplish yesterday?
Well, a better show for Canadians to watch than for Americans to be moved. So I spent the day trying to figure out what would happen if the governors of the Great Lakes, so people who are next to us, came to Ottawa together. And then to press some issue. I don't know what the issue would be. And then wanted to meet with as many politicians as possible. So showed up on Parliament Hill and were invited in the Prime Minister's office building. And then got to meet the press secretary and another staffer. How would that work out? Because that is exactly what happened in the White House, except for the selfies.
Yeah.
You've got Canada's premiers, those who were still left in Washington, going to the White House to be greeted by staffers. I'm not convinced that it was particularly effective. That being said, I'll give the premiers credit for one thing. They have figured out that at this point, the best way to talk to Donald Trump is to talk to people in the White House, because everybody else who used to have connections to the White House doesn't anymore.
Okay, Andrew. That's a fair comparison. They did speak to some other people, but probably not the most important people. They spoke to a couple of Republican senators and others, but how would you gauge in terms of how we're getting through to the one person who seems to be making the decisions?
Yeah, so they talked to the Deputy Chief of Staff and the Director of Personnel. So I guess if they're filing their resumes, maybe that can be helpful. The Deputy Chief of Staff then came out with a rather dismissive tweet saying, well, we had a pleasant meeting, but don't think that I took anything off the table, including the 51st state nonsense. Look, every time one of our emissaries goes down there, it seems like we come out off the worst end of the stick. So the Prime Minister goes down, and that's when Trump started really revving up the 51st state stuff. The premiers go down, and we're getting tariffs now ramped on top of tariffs. So the steel tariffs on top of the 25% threatened tariff, and whatever else he thinks of tomorrow or the next day or the day after that. As we've talked about previously, it's chaos down there. So I am sympathetic to anybody trying to press the Canadian case, because it's not entirely clear who you can talk to, who, if anybody, will have any impact on this. Trump announces things, people below him then say, that's not what he meant. Trump comes out the day after and says, that's exactly what I meant. This is not business as usual, to say the least. And to answer your overall question, no, I don't think we're making much headway. I don't think we're going to be able to avert these tariffs that are coming down the road. I don't fault people for trying, but I'm not sure it's necessarily the best considered strategy.
So Dominic LeBlanc, as we saw in that clip, he met with Howard Lutnick, as did Canada's ambassador down there. He seemed to get maybe a little bit further. He's built up this relationship with Lutnick. But again, today, he was standing by the president talking about reciprocal tariffs and going against people who have VATs, which essentially what he thinks the GST is in this country. So Althea, should the approach be changing if we're talking to the right people but not getting anywhere?
What I was struck from what the premiers were saying was that the advice that they were given was basically just listen to what the president says, i.e. nobody has a clue what's in Donald Trump's head. So we would love to share with you information, probably, but we don't have any information to share. That being said, I don't think it's a bad idea to go down to Washington and to try to build relationships because, to Andrew's point, those relationships all need to be reset. And the strongest relationship we seem to be having is with the finance minister, Dominic LeBlanc, and his soon-to-be official counterpart. But I think the image of the premiers going to DC, yes, for a Canadian audience is nice that, you know, they're united in this Team Canada approach, but also we look scared. Like, we look terrified. And we are. But it also puts us in a vulnerable position. And it tells the White House, well, the Canadians are ready to come here and beg. We just need to make sure that our ask is large enough. And right now, we don't know what the ask is. The yardsticks keep moving. And now, now we're going to have 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum. Like, and then perhaps there'll be more because of the review on April 1st. Like, it's not clear what the outcome is that the president wants. And so I think it's understandable that Canadian officials don't really know how to respond either.
Yeah, I mean, you have to show something though, right? Chantal, like you have to show your own citizens that you're trying things, don't you? Or to Althea's point, does it look kind of weak to not get anywhere, and so we should stop?
It tilts towards what Althea was describing, looking like beggars. At some point, yes, okay, so 50% tariffs on aluminum. I don't believe that you get anywhere without inflicting pain on the other side at this point. Diplomacy isn't cutting it. And I'm going to quote someone I don't usually quote, who was Stephen Harper, who I believe was telling the truth this week, that you're going to have to take pain to inflict pain and to keep this country independent from the United States. And it is time to tell the truth, that you're not going to mitigate that pain unless you really want to be, I mean, you don't know what Donald Trump wants. How many times has he said he's gone for the 51st state thing? I know it's unrealistic, but it's the only thing that he's been coherent about. So stop going to Washington, save money on plane tickets, and start thinking about at what point the American system, the pain that it causes them, the inflation that it brings to them, is a problem. Because a 50% tariff on aluminum, let's be serious, is going to cause a fair amount of pain in the U.S.
Yeah, quickly, Andrew.
I was struck by that Stephen Harper remarks as well. You know, we've always tended to sort of sell Canada to Canadians in terms of what it gives us, not what we have to give it, not in terms of sacrifices. You can't imagine a Canadian Prime Minister saying, you know, ask not what your country can do for you, or we must bear any price, bear any burden. We need a little bit of that this moment. I thought it was a remarkable statement for Stephen Harper to make. Point one. Point two, very quickly, is we cannot be thinking just about this week's tariffs. We've got this guy for at least 4 years. We've got to be playing the long game in terms of positioning ourselves as to to what extent can he push us around and what extent can he not. We need to be laying down those markers, not just for today, but for the next 4 years.
Okay, we're going to leave this part there. Thank you all for that. When we come back, we're going to take a look at how all of this has caused Canada's political landscape to shift.
I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
So how are Trump's comments, like those ones, affecting support for political parties here? What could it mean for the next federal election? That's next. At issue, the political landscape. Donald Trump's threats of tariffs and annexation are forcing politicians here to focus on Canada-U.S. relations.
Canada will never be the 51st state.
Canadians are united on this issue. Canadians have a strong sense of resolve. We're going to stand up collectively for Canada.
Some polls are suggesting movement, with the Liberals gaining a bit of ground for the first time in many months. So what do these changes mean for political parties? How are they responding? Here to break down some of that shifting landscape, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good to see you all. I'm going to state this before we start, that polls vary by methodology. Results are statements of opinion or intention only. We have a poll tracker where we aggregate things, and with that, we're going to talk about sort of what we're seeing, the shifts. Andrew, what can we take away from the trend lines that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, one poll here or there doesn't make a trend, but if you see the bunch of them together and the movement is of the size it's been, extraordinary. Not so long ago it was 26 points. It's now single digits if you average them out. It's obviously this has been related to the Trump phenomenon, particularly since he started talking about the 51st state. The tariffs were alarming enough, but it's become very clearly existential in one way or another. And what it's revealed is a lot of that the conservative support that was in the mid-40s at one point was people who had parked their vote there. They were bound and determined that Justin Trudeau had to go. But now that he's gone, and now that the wolf is at the door, people are looking around, and people are frightened, and people are looking for who has the capacity to rally the country and stand up to Trump, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And if you're a conservative and you're looking at the numbers in this, I think you're a little concerned at what that speaks about the leadership of Pierre Poilievre. We've said it many times on this show, others have said it. He's a very effective opposition leader. He has not done a lot of work in trying to make himself look like a prime minister, including in response to the Trump phenomenon. He has not looked particularly strong. And people are willing, if you look at the numbers, not only have the Liberals pulled within 9 points or 8 points on a party brand basis, but if you pencil in the name of Mark Carney as the Liberal leader, they draw even or even slightly ahead. So people don't know a great deal about Mark Carney, but what they know at this point seems to suggest they look at him as the grown-up, as the person who's a serious candidate, a serious person in a serious time. And I think Pierre Poilievre has got some work to do to recapture the initiative and show that he can be a serious leader as well.
Yeah, and to be clear, the Conservatives are still leading, would still win an election now, and seem to be recognizing, Althea, a need to pivot. Chantal's not sure they'd win, but we'll get to that. But there is a recognition they need to pivot to something, and we're starting to see that.
Well, because of the poll that I'm guessing Chantal is shaking her head at, which is the Leger poll that came out earlier this week that suggests that actually if Mark Carney was the Liberal leader, that he would be neck and neck nationally, but that means that he would basically win the next election because he would win in Quebec, he would win in Atlantic Canada, he'd be very, very competitive in Ontario and boost fortunes in British Columbia. So that, you know, the way the seats are distributed, the efficiency of the Liberal vote means that that's what would happen. Now, obviously, this is hypothetical, and these are, you know, this polling suggests this. So this is the reason why the Conservatives are incredibly worried. Like, I'm not sure that it's that Pierre Poilievre has not looked prime ministerial. I think it's that Pierre Poilievre has repeated some of the same things, the messaging, the tactics, the tone that Donald Trump has. And so if you're looking for somebody who will go head to head with Donald Trump, do you want somebody that, you know, attacks the media like he does, that talks about like unleashed crime waves like he does, that repeats some of the same things? Or are you looking for someone, and we don't know much about Mr. Carney at the moment, and we don't even know, frankly, if he's going to win the Liberal leadership, but it seems like he's a capable technocrat who seems a bit more even keel, a little calmer. Like, that is why I think you're seeing so much of that movement, including from New Democrats, who you do not think would be interested with that, but seem to be gravitating towards Mark Carney's Liberals because they're afraid of Pierre Poilievre. So we are seeing the change from the Canada is broken to the Canada First strategy from the Conservatives. They're going to have a rally on Saturday here in Ottawa, wrapping themselves in red and white, which I will just note, Stephen Harper tried to rebrand Canada Day as red, white, and blue with lots of blue on the stage. So you know it's a sign of desperate times when they're telling people to wear just red and white. And, you know, all the attacks on Carney, whether he's in a lead, whether he's this or that, I think that the focus groups are telling them they have a problem and they're not sure how to address it.
Chantal?
Well, Pierre Poilievre had a really good run for not being Justin Trudeau, and now Mark Carney is a really good run for not being Pierre Poilievre. And there is that. Then there is the change in the ballot box issue. I don't believe we're going to see a campaign that looks like campaigns we usually cover with an announcement on this and that and that. It's going to be a plebiscite on who you want to be facing off against Donald Trump in over the next 4 years. And forget the past. At this point, bio notes versus bio notes, Pierre Poilievre does not necessarily come up on top. Then there's that other issue of the team. I was looking today at my X feed and I noticed that the Conservatives were bragging about a new set of advertising, which is going to feature not Pierre Poilievre, his wife. And I was thinking, at what point does Mr. Poilievre decide that he should feature some of the people in his caucus who could be solid cabinet material? Because at this point, it's been him and his wife. We're not voting for his wife. So I do think that Canadians want to see not only a leader that can take on Trump, but also a team. And I'm not seeing that being featured by the Conservatives.
Well, especially when you have on the Liberal side a whole bunch of people that are taking on Trump, whether they're effective or not. Those cabinet ministers are still there and still doing that work, Andrew.
And they have the advantage of office, and office always makes you look a little more serious and adult. So I think Mr. Poilievre has two things he's got to address. One is, and he's got this big speech, as Althea mentioned, and rebranding exercise. He's got to show some gravitas. He's got to show that he's up to the job, that he has the seriousness and the purpose to be able to handle this kind of very serious situation and not just be his own attack dog. And somewhat conflicting with that, because on the one hand, you want to look calm, cool, and collected, but he's also got to show a little fire in the belly for the country.
Yep.
You know, he can show some flashes when he's talking about crime waves or if he's talking about, fentanyl. He doesn't seem to show quite the same passion for the country. And I don't know if I'm being unfair to him or not, but perception is reality. He needs to show it. He needs to show that he's got Canada in his bones, that he's going to be up there fighting for us because people are frightened right now.
Okay, Althea made a face, so she gets the last word on that one.
Well, I don't think Pierre Poilievre is not patriotic. I think Pierre Poilievre has a very distinct idea of what the country is. And I think actually the Conservatives have done a very good job of talking about how the Liberals have attacked Canadian history and they're not proud of our symbols. And I think that speaks to an audience, including an older audience, which is the audience that seems to have moved to the Liberals because of the Donald Trump threat. I don't think Pierre Poilievre is necessarily going to be bad about going up against Donald Trump if he chooses to do so. The problem for him is that his party is not united on that. There are a lot of Conservatives who actually like Donald Trump.
That's right.
That's a challenge.
Yeah. Last word to you, Chantal, because no one mentioned Chrystia Freeland through this whole conversation.
And I'm not going to. I'm just going to say if you audition for the job of leader of the official opposition, you will usually get that job. And that's what we've been watching for 2 years.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you all for that good conversation. That is at issue for the National. Anyway, we're going to continue this conversation and talk about something Althea referenced there, Canadian patriotism, the rise in being a proud Canadian. Catch that on YouTube or the At Issue podcast. And with that, I'll throw things back to Adrian in Toronto.
Okay, thank you, Rosie. Speaking of patriotism, coming up, when the crowd is so loud, you can't even hear the singer.
In that moment, it was just Canada.
A swell of Canadian pride next in our moment. When the Beaches singer Jordan Miller performed the national anthem last night at the Four Nations Face-Off, she was singing her heart out, but the fans in the stands could barely hear her. So there was no issue with the microphone. Instead, there were 20,000 passionate Canadians singing their hearts out. So tonight, the rousing display of Canadian pride is our moment.
Hearing everyone in unison singing at once, it was so loud. You couldn't even hear the lady over the PA system. In that moment, it was just Canada.
Was just the fans chanting it. Couldn't hear her voice at all. It was loud.
I was losing my voice, just feeding off of the energy that was, just pulsing through that building. It was such a beautiful experience.
It was loud. Everyone kind of put politics aside It was a Canadian atmosphere for sure. It was just chills.
Living in that moment, it was just one nation, one body. Everyone was together.
When Mariner scored, the building shook, literally. That was probably the best hockey game I've ever been to.
And it was the most Canadian pride I've ever felt.
Oh, if you think that was good. Saturday, it's Canada versus the United States. Saturday also happens to be the 60th anniversary of the Canadian flag. So you know what you need to do. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.